All right, this is the Big Douglas Show, week 2 of Opposition Wednesday. It is the Detroit versus the Commanders. Get us closer to the action is Dave Burkett from the Detroit Free Press. Dave, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely, Doug. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Let's see. It is a year 2 for Dan Campbell. The with the Hard Knocks, kind of like the darling of the league right now. I don't know if that's always a Hard Knocks thing, but I think it's easy to root for Dan Campbell. It feels like they're heading in the right direction. Is that how you see it?
I think that's how most people in Detroit see it. You're right. A big part of it is Dan Campbell, and coming off the Matt Patricia era where it wasn't easy to root for the team, and he was a guy that maybe didn't come off publicly as well as Dan does, and now Dan is he's very honest. He's connected with the players. I think his passion, that's something that a lot of fans here in Detroit really like and appreciate, and so. They see this team as a young, hungry, fight hard team, and I think beyond that, they are starting to add a little bit of talent. They're very young, but they do have some good players, both skill players on offense, and Aiden Hutchinson, the number 2 overall pick, where you can sort of dream on maybe what this team can be a year or two down the road. So, yeah, most people here in Detroit, myself included, think the Lions are headed in the right direction.
I think I saw this morning, Dave, that the Lions are now 2.5-point favorite. 2 years. Is that right? Is that the number? 2 years for the Lions? That can't be right.
I thought there was a game last year where they were favored. Maybe the Packers weren't playing anybody late in the season, or there was. I thought there was some game. So it might depend on what sports book you're using, but I definitely saw that as well. And regardless if it's 1 time or 0 times, it's been a long, long time since they've been favored. I mean, they were, they started 0-10-1 last year, so they weren't going to be favored too much at the end of the season. They did put that together a little bit late in the season, but yeah, it's been, again, you go back to the Matt Patricia years, 4 straight years the Lions have finished in last place in the division. And I think there's some optimism that won't be the case this year.
For those that watch this show on a regular basis, they know that when it's not a Commander show, it's a Bulldog show. You went from one of my favorite Bulldogs, Stafford, to one of my other favorites, DeAndre Swift. Before we get to Swift, what was the change like from Stafford? I mean, I know just from Stafford, I mean, he's a guy that people galvanize around, and he's a likable guy. And I think he's great to be the face of the franchise type guy. It just didn't quite work. What is like post Matthew Stafford been like now?
Yeah, last year was a weird year because I think, in some ways, a lot of people were still rooting for Stafford. They maybe blamed the organization for the struggles of the previous 12 years more than they did Stafford. And look, Stafford was a part of that. He certainly didn't play his best football all the time or do maybe some of the things that he did in LA to, win football games. And so I don't think you can totally, divorce him from the struggles they had. But for a lot of long-suffering Lions fans, it was, this is the ownership fault, right? We had a quarterback that can win a Super Bowl. Look what he did in LA. Maybe not giving enough credit to some of the talent and the coaches around him. So last year, I think there was a lot of interest in what Matt was going to do. This year, frankly, or since he won the Super Bowl, I don't think anyone's thought twice of it. It was I think most people knew that the Lions needed to start fresh because after 12 years and you're not winning anything, sometimes it's just time for change. And really, everyone understands that Stafford is a better quarterback than Jared Goff, and it's whether Jared Goff is just going to be a placeholder and for how long. Here in Detroit, or if the Lions are going to go ahead and draft a quarterback. Obviously didn't do it this year, but next year in the coming seasons.
Do they think inside the building that Goff can be that guy?
They're a little more optimistic inside the building than I think the general public is. I sat down with Brad Holmes before the season, Jared for that matter, but talked with Brad a little bit about Jared. And, he was pretty clear that Brad said, this is the best I've ever seen Jared Goff look. And Brad Holmes was the college scouting director in LA. He was the guy who, helped the Rams draft Jared Goff. He was around all those training camps. And he said Goff played as well this summer in training camp as he ever had before in his life. So, I think there's some realism about where they stand. They can get out of the contract after this year if things really go bad. But they also know that Jared did take a team He was the quarterback of the Rams team, at least, that went to the Super Bowl, when they had Todd Gurley and they had a really good receiving core. And so I think you look at the way the Lions have built this roster, it was let's give Jared everything he needs to succeed on offense and build a really young defense and see if we can get those two things to sort of come together at the same time.
Let's start there with the offense. They've got a bunch of weapons. I'm high on the way the offense looks. I was going through possible matchups. The guards, though, for the Lions, frankly, I've never heard of them. So, I mean, that's where we'll look at some of the things for Sunday. That Washington's D-line is getting after it. Tell me about the guard situation and maybe just the overall protection schemes that they've got going on now for the Lions.
Well, I'll tell you, the Lions' offensive line, if they're healthy, they should be one of the better ones in the NFL. They've got 3 first-round picks on the line, and you mentioned it's the 2 tackles in the center, Frank Ragnow, and so that's really the strength of it. But left guard Jonah Jackson, he was a Pro Bowler last year. He went as an alternate, but you talk to people in the building, they really like what he's done, how he's continued to grow. He can be sort of a bulldozer in there. They do have an issue at the right guard spot. Hal Vaitai was supposed to be the starter there. He's out for at least the next 3 games, probably longer, with a back injury. So last week, they played Logan Stenberg at right guard. Stenberg was a left guard only in college. He'd pretty much only played left guard in the NFL. And he had his ups and downs, certainly in his first start. Don't know if that will be the case again this week. Tommy Kramer, who had played right guard throughout training camp, he was out with he was their backup right guard, but he was out last week with a back injury. So we'll see at practice this week if he can get back. If he is, certainly you can see him being the starting right guard there and Logan returning to the bench.
It's early in the week. We're here at 9:20 in the morning on a Wednesday. But how did the Lions fare from a health standpoint? What does the injury report look like early on in the week?
Yeah, no, I guess there's always something that pops up, right? But for the most part, I thought they came out good. I mean, it was, they went into the game with a few more questions, maybe not just Vaitai being out, but Frank Ragnow had suffered a groin injury midweek, and the Lions were a little bit worried about that. He ended up playing through the injury. He's probably not 100%, but he was out there playing last week. Would expect him to be out there again. There's a possibility that they get their strong side linebacker Julian Okwara back this week as well. Okwara probably plays in a backup role for them because they'll obviously play out of sub package a lot with the nickel and Charles Harris sort of being the edge rusher, but that will help their rush packages in some of those situations because Okwara had 5.5 sacks, I think it was, last season, and he certainly would give them another pure pass rusher to pair with those guys up front.
DeAndre Swift has the opportunity to be one of the premier running backs in the league if he's not already. I don't know the numbers offhand, but it feels like Sunday was close to a career game for him. What is the plan on offense? I mean, is that it? Do they want to be a run-first team and set everything up off of that? It's kind of, the league kind of is moving away from that, but obviously there are still teams that maybe just need to focus on that style. What is the plan offensively for the Lions?
Well, and I think that goes back to, what we talked about with Jared Goff a little bit, right? When Goff was at his best, it was play action passes. It was built off Todd Gurley being one of the best running backs in the NFL. And, again, the way the Lions have sort of built this, I mean, they have a really good offensive line. And so if they can get that running game going, protect Goff, both in terms of, play calling and in terms of the protection they have up front, and some of that goes to the play action game, they think he and the offense can be successful. And so, yeah, a lot of it does depend on DeAndre Swift and the success that he has. Last week, he had a really good game. He had a 50-yard run on his first carry. The Lions are, he's not the type of back that's going to get 25 carries in a game or maybe even 25 touches. But, when he does get 20, 22 touches in a game, including his receptions, he's such a mismatch and such a weapon in the open field that, certainly you can see more big days like the one he had last week against the Philadelphia Eagles.
And then they bring the sledgehammer in behind him, right? I mean, I went back and watched that game, and for as fantastic as Swift was, Williams was really good also.
Excuse me. Yeah. No, I mean, Jamal it's definitely a backfield tandem, even though Swift is the clear number one, just the way they use Jamal. Obviously, he scored 2 touchdowns last week, so he can add a little bit of thunder in the middle of the, the middle of the field there. Swift is a guy that you can get out on the perimeter, can really do some damage there. I think the Lions like Jamal Williams. Again, he's a guy that's probably going to get 10 touches a game. So, for anyone playing fantasy out there, you're really touchdown dependent if you want him. But from a pure, schematic standpoint, what the Lions try to do on offense, there's no doubt that both those guys are big parts of what they do. And, last week they really spread it out and put 3 receivers on the field a whole bunch of the time. And they think that just opens the rushing lanes for Swift.
They spent a first-round pick on T.J. Hockenson. I liked the pick at the time. It's interesting. I've been told by many people that know a lot more about football than I do that tight end is one of those positions. It's really hard, maybe the hardest to transfer from college to the pros. It feels like he's in a groove now. Tell me a little bit about what they expect out of Hockenson. And this is year 3 or 4 for him?
Yeah, this is year 3 for him. He's year 4, right? 19, 20, 21, 22. This is year 4 for him. And he's he's had injuries in 2 of his 3 seasons. He broke his leg as a rookie. Last year he tore the UCL on his thumb, and so he missed the end of the season. Maybe when you spend a number 8 pick in the draft on a tight end, I think you want that guy to be, dominant in all phases. And I don't know that TJ has quite been that when it comes to being a blocker, but he's very willing in that regard, and he's certainly a guy that can open up the middle of the field and create some plays in the passing game. So, you said earlier the Lions have some good weapons. I mean, they really do on offense. That running, game with Swift, a really good offensive line. Hockenson he's not a top 5 tight end in the NFL, but he's not too far out of that mix. And now they've got a couple good receivers too with more help on the way. So I think they have a pretty complete offense, and T.J. Hockenson is certainly a big part of that.
Let's switch gears and get over to the defense. What kind of defense? I'm assuming, like most, they're in some kind of sub more than they are in base. What do they like to run out of base when they're there? And what is it like a big nickel situation, or they like to bring in a third safety when they're in sub?
So the Lions transitioned really this year. They were an odd man front last year, even man front this year. More 4-down stuff with, Hutchinson and Charles Harris sort of being the edge rushers, a couple defensive tackles inside. Usually they are in a sub package. And last week it was Mike Hughes. That was the slot cornerback the entire time. Obviously he's a former 1st-round pick. So not really a big nickel, just more of a coverage one, I guess. But they do have that in their packages, and I think it depends on what they're trying to do that week to get done. I mean, they have a couple guys, Fatu Milifan, who's a 2nd-year cornerback who moved to safety, who can, sort of help in some of those sub packages. Will Harris lost the number 2 cornerback job, and he's a former safety, so he can certainly play in there as well, where they have some of those matchup pieces. Given the new strength they have up front, with Hutchinson, the number 2 pick, I think they feel like they don't have to, blitz a ton. But Aaron Glenn is one who certainly likes to mix it up and show some exotic pressures and do some different things. So, they just, the one thing I would say the Lions lack defensively right now is playmakers, true playmakers on that side of the ball. That's where they've been a little bit short, and that's where they need Hutchinson to come along fast.
I noticed that Anzalone is the starting middle linebacker this year. I've been a big fan of his, frankly, since he came from Florida, and I don't say that very often about Florida guys. But what are they hoping that he provides to the defense?
He's a leadership guy, I think, as much as anything. He's Malcolm Rodriguez, their rookie 6th-round pick. I think, if you've seen him play at all, you can sort of dream on him like, wow, how'd this guy fall to round 6? He's going to be a pretty good player, and maybe even makes more plays or will be able to by the end of the season than a guy like Anzalone. But Alex he knows the defense so well, and the coaches trust him. He was in New Orleans before he came to Detroit, where Aaron Glenn was the secondary coach and Dan Campbell was the assistant head coach. So they just have this implicit trust in him to run their defense and get everyone set up and do the right things.
It's been a little bit of a struggle for Okudah. Where are the Lions with him at this point now? What's he looking like?
Started at left cornerback last week. You know, he tore his Achilles last year, so last week was really his second game in about 18 months. He missed the end of his rookie season with hernia surgery too. So, you know, he's had a couple rough years to start his career. And look, if you watch him play, I mean, he does some good things, right? He's a big physical cornerback. He's got some talent. But you also can tell just how raw he is, you know? And so as I look at some of those matchups, I guess, with Washington, you know, the Lions struggled tremendously with A.J. Brown last week. I think he had 10 catches and 14 targets. And most of that, a lot of that was on Amani Oruwariye, their number one cornerback, who they traveled with him a little bit early in the game, and he caught a big pass on Will Harris when Okudah was out with cramps. So I think people here in Detroit would feel as comfortable with Jeff Okudah as anyone playing in coverage right now. But there's no doubt the secondary, really the back seven, is the weak part of the team.
When we get down to those matchups that you talk about, what in your mind is the biggest matchup that will determine the game on Sunday?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the way that Swift ran the ball last week, you know, the Lions are going to be dependent on him for a lot of their offense. You know, Jared Goff didn't look well early in the season, and if Washington can bottle Swift up, you know, I don't know exactly where that leaves the Lions offense, just because, you know, Jared has been hit and miss to this point in his career. So I would think the focal point for Ron Rivera has to be stopping DeAndre Swift and you know, maybe trusting your secondary that they can hang with Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, you know, that Jared Goff will make a mistake and you can take advantage of that. And then look defensively, you know, Jalen Hurts was the one who really hurt the Lions last week, a running quarterback, and that's going to be a different look here this week, obviously with Carson Wentz, you know, under center. So I think for the Lions, the key is just getting some pressure on him. The Lions' only sack last week came from a safety blitz. And they frankly did not have many other opportunities to get to Hurts when he was in the pocket. So as much as we've talked about and seen this as an improved defensive line and improved pass rush, the Lions need to show that on the field.
There is a ton of speed on offense for both teams, as you mentioned. Do you see this being another game like week one? Are we looking at a race to 40, or do you think that we're going to be more in the like 23-21 range here, grinding it out?
Yeah, you know, look, 38-35 was the Lions score last week, and that was two of the three highest scoring teams in the NFL. So that's not an easy number to get to. But, you know, the Lions, as I said, you know, their defense is very much a work in progress. So I do think this number is probably getting into the high 20s at least for the winner. You know, maybe we don't see it quite as many points as we saw last week here in Detroit, but the Lions' strength is their offense. Their weakness is their defense. You mentioned that speed. I think there are some opportunities for, you know, Dotson, for McLaurin, for some of those guys to get loose in that secondary if Washington can protect up. So I do think this is probably, you know, the winners winning 28-24, somewhere in that neighborhood.
And you were interested in picking a winner?
Well, early in the week, I mean, I would probably say the Lions, you know, being at home. And look, you know, again, for all the optimism there is here in Detroit, you know, if they start 0-2 with two home losses and, you know, frankly, to a mediocre Washington team, and I'm sure Washington is looking at Detroit the same way, right? This is a game that we should win. And so if you're the Lions and you start 0-2, there's just going to be a lot of people that jump off that bandwagon. So I think this is, from that standpoint, it's week 2, and I know nothing's must win, but it's a very important game from the Lions. And I do think that, you know, they realize that and they fight for Dan Campbell. And so I think I picked the Lions in a close one in this one.
Dave, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you. I know you're out on the road for this one, so the time, we appreciate it. What do you got coming up in the newspaper this week?
A little to be determined based on how the interviews go today and who I can get on the phone. But bottom line is, you know, we'll be writing all about the Lions this week. I mean, I think one thing, right, is DeAndre Swift, and maybe I know he feels he left something out on the field. So that's something to look for midweek, is what more does DeAndre Swift have to offer this Lions offense?
Excellent. Appreciate you, Dave.
You got it. We'll do it again.
Excellent. Thanks.
You good, Doug?
I am. Thank you, man.